What led you to this business?
Well, it's kind of a funny story. I had a friend of mine. I was graduated from Rogers High School in 1961. I had a real good friend of mine by the name of Mel Patterson. He graduated a year before I did. We were both in marching band, and we both played trombone. So my senior year, after our procedures, after the halftime show, then we were free to walk around the stadium. Of course, this was out in the old Skelly Stadium. And so I was walking around with some friends of mine. I walked past the ambulance, and this guy says, "Hey, Dopp, come here." And I turned around, and it was my buddy, Mel Patterson. And he had brought the ambulance out to the football game because he always had an ambulance at the football game. And I got talking to him, and he said, "Hey, won't you come hang out with me?" He said, "We'll ride around, go get coffee and stuff, you know." Of course, I was 17 years old at the time. That was kind of exciting, riding around in an ambulance. So I started hanging around the funeral home in the evenings. I'd go down, we'd go riding, you know, in the ambulance, cruising down.
So the funeral homes run all the
All the funeral homes had ambulance service. See, we operated the ambulance up until 1969, and then a private firm came in and took over the ambulance service. But it was very common for funeral homes to operate the ambulance and do the transfers when people would transfer from the hospital to home, or maybe from the hospital to a nursing home. They would call the funeral home, and we'd send a car out to make the transfer. You know, there's a lot of funeral homes where the funeral director lives up above the funeral home. That was very common many years ago. In your smaller communities, they build a funeral home and then have a residence up above the funeral home.
Well, I know in the settlement days of Oklahoma and the Old West, a lot of businesses would always have residences right above the front, no matter what type of business it was.
Right. You know, and we at one time, the funeral business, a lot of hardware stores, it was a combination, because the hardware stores, they would build the furniture and they would build the casket, and so they would have the funeral home as part of it. In Coeed, Oklahoma, up until a few years ago, I think the funeral home was connected to the hardware store there.
In the times of the settlement days, a lot of times the services, like the embalming, might actually take place
at the residence.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. When did that change? Around the...
Oh, golly. That probably was in the 20s, probably. I'm just trying to remember. They were talking to, there was I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he told me that he used to go to the residence. And this was back in the 60s when I got acquainted with him. And he was probably in his 70s or 80s. Mm-hmm. But he talked about going to a residence and doing the embalming. They had a table that they took, and their instruments and everything else. Would do the embalming at home, you know, and back, you know, in probably the 20s, 30s, or before that, somebody died, the funeral director, he'd bring a casket out, you know, from a hardware store, which he probably made. He'd take it out to the house, do the embalming, place the person in the casket, they'd have the service, and then bury on their property. That was very common. You know, and death was a part of life. It was something that, you know, nowadays, when we get sick, we go to a hospital. Some of the families kind of shielded. They're kind of changing and getting people more involved in, you know, like with hospice, where they actually take the person home and let them be in their own environment. Family members are there, and they actually go through the dying process with the person, which I think in a way is beneficial. I mean, it's you're there for their support and support each other. When you take away the unknown, it takes a lot of fear away. Family members, you know, many times they would be there around the person when they're dying. It was a comfort to the dying person and a comfort to the family to be there with them.